Hello, I'm Paul Taylor and I live in South Australia, and I have an interesting hobby, and that is walking sticks. I've been collecting walking sticks since I was about 10 years old, so that makes it about 58 years that I've been collecting, and it's one of those hobbies that has just kind of evolved. I heard that Maurice Chevalier, the well-known French cabaret entertainer, he had a big collection of several hundred sticks, and at the time when I was about 10 years of age, I had about 4 or 5 sticks kicking around the house that had belonged to, you know, grandparents and other family members, and so that sort of gave me the idea that perhaps I could start collecting sticks as well. And my holidays down at Port Elliot and Victor Harbour in South Australia, it's a very popular retirement area, that gave me a good source of supply to start my collection. So I picked up sticks down there back in the 60s, late 50s and 60s, and I picked them up for very reasonable prices and found some very interesting ones, because these would end up in second-hand shops and antique shops, and so that sort of kicked my collection off. And from there, the further I've gone down the collecting path with walking sticks, the greater the interest has become, because I found that as I went along, the variety of sticks that they come in, that the different forms and the materials they're made from, the beautiful timbers that they come in, I just found absolutely fascinating and absorbing. So my collection sort of began from there. When I went overseas at the age of 21, I brought back a swag of sticks. Back in those times you could bring sticks in from overseas without the same restrictions that you have today. So I brought in some interesting sticks from overseas, and one of those was this stick, for example. This is a very interesting stick. It's got a beautiful ivory head on it in the form of a bulldog, and so this sort of, you know, is representative of the kind of sticks that you can collect. All kinds of materials, some of them are prohibited now. So yes, the collection of sticks has become more and more interesting as I've gone along. And so yeah, travelling abroad has been a wonderful opportunity for me to discover sticks that for example, reflect the culture of some countries and the craftsmanship of some of these places. And for example, there's one here which came, this stick is from Brazil, and I got this at Iguazu Falls. It's got a crocodile head, and it's got you know, an Indian, a South American Indian face. It's got, this one has semi-precious stones on it. So yes, this is an interesting one as well. And so that was from South America. And then a trip to Egypt several years ago in Cairo. Again, this stick, this is a new stick. It hasn't, I've got no sense of what the history of this stick is, because it is a new stick, as opposed to many of my sticks that date back over 100 years. They go back to the 1850s, 1860s, and the Victorian period. So this stick is interesting. It's got writing, Arabic writing, made from nails. Fine nails have been tapped into the wood and then smoothed off, and it creates an interesting message on this stick. Now, I don't know what it says. It may be something from the Quran, for example, but I can only guess what that might be. That's one of the things I'll need to do a bit of research on. Quite a lot of the sticks in my collection, I have quite a lot of research that I need to still do, although I'm now in retirement mode, so I'm able to you know, catalogue my sticks properly. And another stick that I find that I found of interest was this one, which came from India, and it's made from camel bone. It has a very typical Indian traditional pattern, has a traditional Indian pattern on it down the shaft, and as I say, made from camel bone, so it's not a overly rare or special material. Camel bone is still readily available. Another one from India was this stick, which is very, very attractive. I got this at a very reasonable price. I almost felt sorry for the guy that I bargained with because I got it at a very reasonable price. But yes, the workmanship is fantastic. It's all metal, has an elephant head and beautiful workmanship, sort of tooling down the shaft. It's all metal. So yeah, it's a beautiful stick. A lot of hours of work goes into producing some of these sticks. Another one is this one, which came from China. Now this, I got this in Beijing, and it has beautiful cloisonné work down the shaft. So yes, cloisonné work is a magnificent craft in China. The labour costs would be prohibitively high to do this sort of work in Australia, but these vases are cloisonné as well, the same workmanship on those vases. The thing that you don't see a lot of today is walking sticks out in the street. Now, back in the Victorian era, for example, or the mid to late 1800s, a walking stick was part of your going out apparel. So you'd step out, you'd put your hat on, you'd grab your stick or a cane or whatever, and you'd go out with that. And today, I think, you know, that the fact that you have hip replacements and joint replacements, and you can have a walking frame and other things to get around. Walking sticks are not quite, you know, as obviously out in the street that the way they used to be. But the time and effort that goes into creating a really interesting stick is something that is also of great interest to me, because you know, it can take hours to craft and create something really, really nice. This stick here came from Casablanca, and it's ivory. It's a beautiful stick. I brought this in to Australia in 1980, and ivory, of course, is a prohibited material now, and of course these sort of things you wouldn't be able to bring in unless you had a special permit, perhaps. Then a lot of sticks served a double purpose. For example, this stick here, this one I bought in Melbourne, and it came from Army Disposals. And the interesting thing with this stick is that it's got a shaft that comes up here, which has a spirit level forming a right angle at the top, which you can bring down to read the height of a horse, the hand's height of a horse. So you take it down to the shoulder of the horse, and you read off from here the hand's height, and this is about 15.5 hands to that point. So it goes up to about 17 hands, very big horse. So yeah, that's a very interesting little stick, which I've had for a long time. But that one and another stick like this one, for example, has a telescope in it. This one's might have belonged to an old sea captain, for example. This unscrews, you've got a nice little telescope there, which is interesting as well. Serves a useful function. And then some sticks, of course, were used for self-defense. You know, a lot of sticks had, for example, a sword in them, or a knife, or even a gun stick. But otherwise, they were just sticks that were used purely for effect, you know, to look good. A stick like this is an interesting stick. This came from Scotland, and it's got St Andrews stamped across the top, but it represents, of course, a golf club, and it's got the initials HAD on a silver plate on the back. And so I've got a bit of research to do on this stick. It may have been presented to a long-serving you know, president or a secretary of St Andrews Golf Club in Scotland. That's a nice stick, beautifully made. I bought that in 1960. And then we've got this one here. This one belonged to a doctor in the Midlands of England, Dr. Buck Ruxton. This stick has 3 dancers, Indian or Burmese dancing girls on the top, and it's a silver, beautiful silver top with very fine silver workmanship in the form of 3 dancing girls. So this is always a stick that I describe as one of my favourites. I bought that in Birmingham. And another stick is this one here, which I bought in India, and it came from the ancient walled city of Jaisalmer, which is out on the western side, the Pakistani side of India, in Rajasthan. And this stick belonged to the Maharaja of Jaisalmer, and it's a beautiful silver shaft with a 17th century jade handle on the top. Then another stick that I got, which I have got some genuine history on, and that is this stick here, which is a whale tooth forming the handle. It's on palm wood shaft, but it has a 9-carat gold plate on the end, and on that plate is engraved the words "Presented to the Honourable W.M. Hughes, Prime Minister of Australia, from the people of Fiji in January 1916. So this stick was presented to the Prime Minister of Australia, Sir Billy Hughes, and yeah, it's a very special stick. I bought this at auction in Sydney a few years ago. And then another one which I find really interesting, and that is this stick. I bought this in Buenos Aires last year. I was in South America on my 3rd trip to South America. I really like that country, that part of the world, and this is from Argentina, from Buenos Aires, but it's a camera, it's a spy camera, and it actually opens out. You've got the lens at this end. In here you put the film. It's got the workings in here to put your film. It's got the shutter button here, and the film winder on the back. So you've got the winder for the film at that side, and it was called a Benakiba spy camera walking stick, and it was made in Berlin by Mr. Lehmann in 1903. So it's a very rare, very special stick. It's called a Benakiba spy camera stick. So that was a very interesting. I was very excited to find that stick, because I've heard a lot about sticks and the things they have in them. Of course, popular ones have a brandy flask in them. Some have a compass, and and so you can discover some interesting things with some of these sticks. This stick here, despite it being very, very plain, I really love it. It's made from lignum vitae, and I bought this in London in 1966. It's very, very plain, but it is beautiful wood, very, very dense, very heavy, has just a beautiful feel about it. And again, somebody has found this, has seen the possibilities in this piece of wood, and decided, yes, that's something that could be made into a magnificent stick. So a lot of my sticks really are just a piece of wood that has been polished, burnished, cleaned up, and maybe with a bit of subtle patterning on it, and that's all it is. It's just a stick which immediately is very attractive. Yes, the other thing is that I just don't know. I've been collecting them all these years. Many of them have come from overseas, and I'll just continue to collect my sticks as time goes by. As you can see, I've got them displayed on racks on the wall. This is a room that I come into most days. I'm able to enjoy my sticks, just sitting in here, having a cup of coffee, relaxing. I can see the results of a lifetime of collecting, and it's just been a very absorbing hobby, something that I'll continue to do for many years, I'm sure. Thank you. Yes, my email address is Paul Taylor, Paultaylor, Paul Taylor, @riverland.net.au. Look forward to hearing from you.